In this demonstration, we're going to configure a captive portal. Captive portals force a user to view and interact with them before they can access a network or the internet. After you connect your device to the wireless or guest network, but before you can access the internet, you're redirected to a captive portal page. You might be prompted to agree to the terms and conditions of using the network, and you might be asked to pay a fee to gain access. Some even allow users to log in to use the network. They're used a great deal, and you've most likely used one before, especially at places like hotels or airports. Today, we'll be using a captive portal that's part of pfSense. pfSense sits between the internal network and the internet, as you can see in this diagram here. We want to configure the captive portal so that any device that connects to our guest Wi-Fi will have to go through the captive portal in order to get internet access. I have a network adapter installed in pfSense that I'm going to use for my guest Wi-Fi. If I scroll down, you can see it listed right here. So, let's get started. I'll go to Services, Captive Portal, and click on the Add button. Under Add Captive Portal Zone, I want to enter in our zone name, Guest Wi-Fi. For zone description, I'll put in Guest Wi-Fi. By the way, for the zone name, you can only use letters, digits, and underscores, but you can use any character for the description name. Click the Save and Continue button. Now, under Captive Portal Configuration, let's check the Enable Captive Portal checkbox. When we do, we get a bunch of options. Under Interfaces, you'll see my guest Wi-Fi interface that we looked at in the beginning of the demo. Now, depending on your network, you could have a VLAN configured for your guest Wi-Fi. My demo environment isn't set up with VLAN, but that would work really well for this. This is the one we want to pick. Under Maximum Concurrent Connections, we can put in a number of concurrent connections. I'll put 5 in here. This isn't the number of users, but rather how many connections a single IP can establish to the portal. For idle timeout, we'll put in 60 minutes. If a client is inactive for that amount of time, they'll be disconnected. Hard timeout limits a connection no matter what. We might not want users on our guest network forever, so you can limit the time they spend. Let's put in 120 minutes. We can also give guest users a traffic quota. We might not want them streaming video for 2 hours, so we can put something in here to restrict that if we like. I'll just leave it blank for now. I'm going to leave the next several set to the defaults and scroll down a bit until I see Per User Bandwidth Restriction. Let's go ahead and check the box to enable it. This limits users' download and upload speeds. For default download, I'll put in 10,000 kilobits per second, which is about 10 megabits per second. For the default upload, I'll put in 3,000 kilobits per second, which is about 3 megabits per second. We could use a custom captive portal page. Let's check the box. When I do, you can see that I would need a custom page to upload. I would also need an error page and a logout page. I'm just going to use the default page that comes with pfSense for my captive portal page, but if I were setting this up for real use, I'd certainly want a custom page. I'll go ahead and uncheck that box. I could also upload a custom logo or a custom background for my page. For the terms and conditions, I can put in something like, "Don't be bad on the internet." For authentication method, we're not going to use any authentication. We could use Radius if we had that set up, or we could use some other type of authentication. But for this demo, I'll select None, Don't Authenticate Users from the dropdown. We could enable HTTPS login, but if I did, I'd have to configure the server to have a certificate, and I haven't done that, so I'll just leave that unchecked. Here at the bottom, it reminds us to set up DHCP on our captive portal interface. I've already done that, so we're good to go there. That's all we're going to set up here, so click on Save to continue. And here you can see that our captive portal page has been created. Now, before we continue, let's briefly look at a few options that we skipped and aren't going to configure. Under the Max tab, we can get a little more granular with bandwidth control as far as limiting the upload and the download. Under Allowed IP Addresses, we can do the exact same thing, but by IP address instead of MAC address. Allowed host's name is the same, but by hostname. Here we have vouchers. Vouchers are single-use codes used to gain internet access through a captive portal. Now, vouchers are commonly implemented in places where authentication is required, but where there is also a time limit on internet access. And lastly, the File Manager tab is used to upload files that are used inside a captive portal page, such as style sheets and image files. Now, let's test out our captive portal over on our guest Wi-Fi network. I've switched over to our guest Wi-Fi network. What should happen when we go to surf the web is that we should get redirected to our captive portal page. I'll open up our web browser, and we're directed to our pfSense captive portal page. Remember, I didn't configure authentication, so all I have to do is check the box to agree with the terms and conditions to proceed. I'll click Login, and after a second, I'm forwarded to my homepage. That's it for this demo. In this demo, we configured a captive portal on pfSense to force users to agree to terms and conditions before being allowed to access the internet.